Good morning, gamers. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for all the support on the last video. I think all the likes and comments actually helped it reach a much bigger audience, so I really appreciate it, and I think that's really cool. And thank you to Nil in Twitch chat for helping me find Hollow Knight. They recommended it, and it kind of slaps, eventually. So, Hollow Knight's a game pretty much everyone seems to at least have heard about. Maybe you've seen it on a YouTube recommended, maybe your friend recommended it to you, but everybody, their grandmother, their dog, they all seem to have known about the game, and everybody seems to have an opinion on it. Some people have gotten every little trinket, checked every corner of the map, and talked to every NPC, or maybe they speedrun the game, so they skip all of that every time. But what's the game like for somebody who's never played it before, like me? Keep in mind, this is simply my first impression of the game as somebody who has little to no knowledge about it and is playing through it for the first time. Somehow I made it to 22 without having almost any knowledge about Hollow Knight. I've hardly seen any content, and I've actually never played a Metroidvania before, so this was my first. As such, take any information or knowledge that I'm putting forward with a little grain of salt, and just try and look past it to see the video as an unbiased interpretation of the game. Lastly, most of the issues I have with the game are skill issues, so they're not necessarily issues with the game itself, but more so issues for a first-time player. And before we get into things, should you play Hollow Knight for the first time blind? If you're fine with the default ending, you should absolutely play the game blind. But if you want any ending other than that, I would highly recommend doing it with a guide. You'll be really hard-pressed to get the guidance you need from the game for that kind of thing, but you should play through the default ending on your own and then whip out a guide after that. You drop into the game in a small starting area, which has a tutorial on the movement. The movement, by the way, immediately feels crisp, like mwah, beautiful. Having come from Rain World where you feel like a confused lump of flesh waddling around, despite being small, you feel fast and fierce. Once you reach the end of the starting area, you reach the place that will be the hub of your adventures, a single safe environment for you to rest in and slowly accumulate familiar faces to speak with, in their funny Sims-like way. The tutorial is very brief, but that's because honestly the game is very simple. You can jump, swing your nail to hit enemies that give you soul, use that soul to heal, and go explore somewhere to find something, I don't know. But whatever you're looking for is probably out there. It's not the game that feels clunky at the start, it's you as the player. The knockback the player receives when their nail makes contact with something is a bit difficult to get used to, and it caused me to fall off platforms into spikes many times. The first area or two are incredibly forgiving though. Getting used to the controls and movement in the start is no simple task for someone like me, but it wasn't long before I was breezing through them, moving onwards towards greater and harsher pastures where I could take damage and fall into more environmental hazards, and feel dumb for it every time. If you don't like the nail knockback or how short your swing range is, don't worry. You find out what a charm is after a short period in the game, and despite having single digits amounts of geo, you quickly discover shops that can allow you to purchase other charms. These little trinkets change the way your character works in a small way. For example, one you get early on makes it so you get more soul from each hit on an enemy, or you can buy one that reduces the nail knockback I mentioned earlier to 0. Very convenient stuff that I pretty much avoided like the plague because I was always too focused on getting to the next place or buying other important items. But we'll touch on that a little bit later because I did eventually get into it. I had just completed one of the endings by the time I did, so 16 hours into my run, which was a mistake. I should have done it way earlier. Speaking of heading to new, more challenging areas, I am like horribly directionally challenged in games. I'm fine about it in real life, like I can find my way, I do pretty well. But for some reason, in games, no shot. I tend to spend at least like half my time in the game just kind of lost or feeling directionless if there's no quest marker or map marker that I'm supposed to go to. So with that being said, first thing you realize is, I don't have a map of this area. And then you get to the next area and you go, I don't have a map of this area. And then you meet Cornifer. You can find Cornifer via a sound cue and some visual bits of paper on the ground. He offers to sell you a local area map for some geo. It's not a complete map of the area, but with an item available in his wife's shop on the surface, you begin mapping areas you explore and completing the map yourself. In your quest to map everything out, you also find places you simply can't get to because they're too high up, or they're too dark to see in, or some other obstacle blocks your path, like a door with an obvious lever behind it, but no clear path around to the other side. This is, in essence, what a Metroidvania is all about, guiding you with roadblocks to the intended path, so you come back to the places you couldn't get to before and progress through exploration and time. By the way, instead of doing what I did, which is just walk away and decide to come back to the inaccessible spot later, make a note of it. There are pins you can purchase from the mapping shop to mark spots on your map, and you can even, heaven forbid, write down somewhere what the pin is for. I did not do this until about 10 hours into my playthrough, and while it's manageable at first when you only have a few areas unlocked, eventually it cost me my sanity. Cornifer's wife, Zelda, actually sells lots of useful pins that apply themselves automatically to your map, such as NPC shop locations and save spots, so I picked those up as soon as I could. There are ways to get around the map more quickly, such as stag stations, which you unlock as fast travel points around the map, most of the time featuring a save point right next to them for easy area access. I do have my gripes about this system though. There are a good number of save points, but there just aren't enough stag stations. And why are they not all labeled on the map? Honestly, why not make it so you can travel between save points? You later unlock something that allows you to fast travel to one set location, but that is near the end game. It's not uncommon that you'd have to spend a couple of minutes traversing a landscape you've already seen tens of times just to get a shot at continuing to explore a new area you haven't traveled around in as much, or having to waste time getting to an upgrade NPC like the nailsmith who could have been in a much simpler location, all while being scared you're going to lose your cash by dying repeatedly on your way there. Some locations make navigation quite difficult, and finding a save spot within them isn't always as easy as just following the signpostings you occasionally see around. This means that if you died somewhere, it could take you a couple of minutes to get back to that room, then to die in that room again, as you not only have to clear the room, but now deal with reclaiming your shadowy spirit that left your body on death. It does contact damage and unleashes attacks on you. It can be frustrating when getting to a location you died in, only to have taken damage beforehand and be on an even worse foot than you were the last time you entered. But after finally making it through trap rooms and winding landscapes, you run into one of many bosses, which I think for the most part are the highlight of the game. Bosses in this game actually go kinda hard. Not like they're particularly difficult, but they're actually for the most part really fun to fight. Some are better than others, but the good fights feel really good. There's a sort of rhythm to them. The first couple of bosses are total pushovers, but after that, it's not going to be uncommon for you to have to try a couple, maybe even 10-15 times to be able to beat a boss, especially if your upgrades are quite weak. One fight I remember really distinctively as having a really good rhythm to it and feeling very clean is the Mantis Lord's boss fight. Having the two enemies with synchronized attack patterns really felt like you had to dance in and out of them just to be able to get some hits in and keep yourself alive. That being said, multiple enemies being thrown at you at once is often handled poorly in the game. There are rooms and even bosses where instead of a cool gimmick or an interesting mechanic, the game simply gives you more simple enemies to fight at once. It's mob spam. It's not fun, it's not interesting, and it's not engaging. None of their attacks are timed together in a way that makes sense, or allows you to skillfully weave around and deal damage. It's just an uncoordinated assault that feels horrible to deal with, and really takes away from the rhythm and learning experience of the other boss fights. Sure, with a veteran skill set, it would probably be child's play, but as a first-timer, it felt to me like it really just left a blemish on a combat system I otherwise really enjoyed. As I mentioned, sometimes the rewards for killing bosses are new abilities that grant you access to new locations, and sometimes it is just extra geo or a piece of lore and a charm, but hey, you did it, and that's what matters. From those little bits of boss lore, you really don't get much. During my entire first playthrough, I understood pretty much nothing in terms of what all my slaying was accomplishing. I'd say that was for about the first 12 hours, and I was only kind of piecing stuff together by the time I defeated the final boss, unlocking my first ending, of which there are a few. I perpetuated the stasis of Hollow Nest and effectively accomplished nothing, as far as I can tell. It was just that I left a bunch of destruction in my wake to take the place of someone else and do the same thing they were doing. When I completed this final boss fight, I had 45% game completion, however that's measured, and it took me 16 hours and 20 minutes to do it. I was immediately informed, however, that yay, you did it, but that I should go for the true ending. That's because there's actually a lot of lore you can get from that ending, and I could simply pick up where I left off before the last boss fight. So, in an attempt to get more information, I decided to go for the true ending, and in doing so, I actually had the most fun yet, as I had every movement ability, every skill at my disposal, and could get literally anywhere I wanted to, assuming I could find the way. There were no more roadblocks, I knew how to move and groove through areas, and it was great because suddenly the 4 charms I had grew into 20. I changed up my playstyle, I got to purchase all the maps from a Zelda's map shop that the game had to offer. I realized there was an entire area I had missed. I was actually being rewarded for my exploration in the volume one might expect, instead of being rewarded with a, oh, come back soon, you probably almost got the ability you need, good luck finding it. It felt very satisfying, and that play session was my favorite one, even now that I've finished. I was led by a friend through unlocking and achieving the true ending. However, what I'm about to complain about is a big spoiler, so cover your ears and skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear about it. Okay, so the Radiance fight is cool. Like, the boss design is cool. Taking a bunch of damage kind of sucks, but it makes it feel really impactful. Like, the fight itself is good. I understand that thematically it makes sense, and for lore reasons it makes sense that you have to fight the Hollow Knight before you get to fight the Radiance. But holy shit, after I have defeated them 10 times in a row without fail, please, for the love of God, just let me skip to the actual boss fight. That shit sucked, and instead of getting to actually enjoy the fight and learn how to avoid things, I would just hammer it into my brain, hoping that I get it right, so that I don't have to fight the first boss over and over again just to get back to where I was. When trying to achieve the true ending, I enjoyed everything up to that point a lot. I really loved changing my charms around to deal with the Dream Warriors, especially the White Defender, the Kin, and that floaty mage guy, whatever his name is. And I love platformers, especially really hard ones. So I'm probably going to go back and do Path of Pain, but I really liked the White Palace. And just as if to say, hey, thank you so much for putting in all that effort and all that time to get this far. I'm now going to proceed to waste as much of your time as possible with the beginning of this fight. Thanks for playing. It took me an extra 8 hours to get the true ending, and an hour and a half of that was spent fighting the Hollow Knight, the old boss that I had already beaten and continued to beat over and over again. Same as last time, the review might seem a bit negative at this point, but overall, I'd recommend playing this game to anybody that likes really crisp movement and combat or Metroidvanias, because honestly, it was a mostly fun experience. It just had a few not so fun pieces thrown in there. I'd rate the first time experience if you're going to get the default ending, probably a 6 or a 7, maybe an 8 if you explore more than I did and unlock more of the charms earlier on and play around with them a bit. They do genuinely make the game more interesting and dynamic. I would say getting the other endings, if you want to do it without a guide, would be incredibly difficult and probably an incredibly painful experience. But if you do it with a guide, I would rate it a solid 8 out of 10. When playing through for the first time, in order to enjoy it, you should talk to every NPC you can, gather as many charms and mess around with them as frequently as you want, and fight as many bosses as possible because you never know when you're going to find one that you really like. The music is good. The environments are sometimes a bit dreary, but they're all fleshed out and have their own visual appeal. The movement and combat mechanics feel incredible to use and to play against. Plus, the NPCs are really fun and unique. Each monster is interesting to encounter for the first time for its visuals, or maybe it has a gimmick to it which you gotta learn, and that's really rewarding. Plus, the game has Hornet in it, so that immediately puts it a little bit higher on my list. I enjoyed the game, and if you enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate if you left a like on it so that more people can see it. Also, if you have any comments on how I did or things I could improve on in the future, please leave them because I'm pretty new to this. Oh, and subscribe, because I will be making more videos like this. I don't intend to play the DLC for this game right away, but if it is going to happen, it'll happen over on my Twitch, which is linked in the description with a couple of my other socials. One of which has a Hollow Knight playlist of all the VODs if you want to see the process. I'll be making more videos, probably on like Carrion and Spelunky and whatever else you guys want to see, or whatever else I want to play. Stay tuned for when that happens. But thank you so much for watching. I've been Lunan. Hopefully I will see you in the next video.